So here we are just on the outskirts of Wetaskiwin, about 3 hours north of Calgary. And here we see the wheat fields that have been taken off. It's harvest time. The Wetaskiwin Mission Church has been able to secure this land right at the corner of the city of Wetaskiwin, and have been able to build a significant church of about 300 people coming to this church, and for a prairie city, that's really something. So we're just going to go in now and address the whole issue with the pastors of how they have transitioned leadership in this church.
So my name is Jim Houston, and I'm the Canada West Superintendent for the Associated Gospel Churches. I live in Calgary and work from there, and one of the churches that I work with on a reasonably regular basis is the Wetaskiwin Mission Church. That's where we are today, here in Wetaskiwin, Alberta, and we're taking a few minutes to speak with Dan Sudfeld, who is the senior pastor of the church, and his associate Wayne Winks. And you may be able to tell by looking at us that Wayne is probably the senior member of the trio here, and he was the senior pastor at one point of the Wetaskiwin Church. But we are here today to talk a little bit about how that transition has taken place.
The idea was brought then to a congregational meeting.
So before you approached Dan, that came to the congregational meeting?
Yes. I suggested his name. The elders didn't know Dan. Now at this point, the congregation had not been brought into the discussion. So we didn't approach Dan until we'd gone to the congregation and said, this is how we're thinking. Now the concern that was expressed to me by some in that meeting was, what's going to happen to you?
So they were concerned about your future.
They were concerned about my future. And I explained that on the basis of one, I had now turned 65, and my health, and for the betterment of the church, and the future of the church, and the potential of the church, I think someone with different skills in leadership should be brought into the picture.
So did the congregation, having had that explained by the leaders and assured by yourself that you were okay with it, did they seem to accept it? Well,
they accepted that, and I'm not sure whether Dan's name came into the discussion among the elders prior to the congregational meeting. Certainly his name wasn't brought up at that congregational meeting. The congregation trusted the elders to do proper searches and so on.
So then when Wayne called you, was that kind of were you expecting that, or was it kind of right out of the blue for you?
Yeah, it was right out of the blue. I wasn't aware of this process at all, and of course at that point, in my previous ministry, I'd gotten a few offers, as are prone to happen when you've been in one position for 10 or 11 years already, and never really considered any of them. But the opportunity to work with Wayne was what intrigued me at the beginning, and the process. The fact that I could work as an associate before I became the senior there. So the opportunity to get to know the people, get to know the church, that was intriguing for me.
I thought that Dan was the kind of guy that could take the church to another level, but also had a philosophy of ministry which suited where we were at, had a theological position which was familiar to the congregation because that's where I was coming from. So there would be no tension in that area. And I think I knew Dan well enough that he was not going to come in here and just sort of rock the boat and try to change everything, and he really hasn't. So Dan is more of an administrator than I am. He's more proactive than I am, which is good. Good preacher. And I guess the toughest thing for me was giving up preaching every Sunday, because I love to preach. So Dan and Marlene, the family, came in July of 2009, and I think Dan may have preached once a month for the rest of the year. And then, as we were coming to the end of 2009, I suggested to the board, I'd like to divide the preaching right down the middle. Dan preach, halftime I preach, the other halftime. And that's what we did. And that's what we're still doing, actually. We have 2 Sundays where he preaches, 2 Sundays where I preach. We do exposition. That's our major focus, is taking books of the Bible and preaching through them. Dan's style of exposition is different than mine, because he can take a whole chapter and preach a sermon on it. I would probably take 6 sermons on that chapter. So that, and it's a different pace for the congregation, which is good.
So Dan, as you look at it, why would you say it's worked well?
Oh, a number of things. Number one is the plan that they had. The plan that was presented to me is the plan that we followed. They had thought about how this would work. The preaching, the sharing the preaching is one example of that. And so I think that's one of the reasons it worked really well. And the congregation was brought into the loop very early, and the board was brought into the loop, and I think that was important to it. And Wayne was on board with it. So at those 3 levels, I think it was very important, at the congregational level, at the board level, and Pastor Wayne had to be on board with this. And I think that's why it's worked. And then another reason I would add is what's been brought up already, just our same-mindedness, Pastor Wayne and myself. So the congregation was already used to that. It wasn't a huge transition for the church, and I think it's been very, from our perspective, and I think just talking with some other people, it's been a very seamless and very good transition.
There's a great deal of trust by the congregation in the elders. And I really appreciate that. We're not infallible at all, but the recommendations that we have brought to the congregation, they have approved.
And it probably wouldn't have happened without that kind of respect from the congregation to the elders, because they wouldn't trust them to lead them into that process if they didn't trust that they were going to do the right thing.
Absolutely. And if I could add just one more thing, I think that was important in this during when the final transition happened, is that Pastor Wayne wrote a letter, gave it to all the entire congregation, affirming me in this role, affirming the fact that he was comfortable with it, and I thought that was kind of the, put it maybe the final straw or whatever, that everybody was on board with this, the icing on the cake. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, and saying, yeah, I'm good with this. And I affirm Dan's gifts for this. I think he can do that. And I think that was very important to us and our family, and very important to the congregation, I would think, as well.
Good. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate both Dan and Wayne and the transition that's happening here at Wetaskiwin. And just so you know, the church is continuing to grow, and I think that's one of the affirmations, although not that success is a measure of anything necessarily, but it's just nice to see the congregation responding to it. So thank you very much. God bless you both and the church.
Thank you.